susceptibility. And you may even have like a damage that you weren't aware of to the stem or something from an insect. And I think this sclerotina, which is the pathogen that causes this, is pretty much there. I've had trouble with it on and off in an isolated plant or two. You did the right thing. You know, usually you cut that part off. I've even cut like the stem open and just supported it and let the air in there, and then sprayed it with a fungicide. And a lot of times that, you know, it'll recover, but not always.
Yeah, it's very strange. It was 6 to 8 inches off the ground, so it wasn't anything from the soil directly, and some of the laterals are still okay.
Yeah. You can cut it out if you can get it, you know, before it spreads. But most of the time, like with Tammy's, it starts right around the soil level or below the soil level.
Is anybody seeing virus in anything?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I thought I was getting some vein discoloration in my leaves. So I put some additional 10-10-10 granular fertilizer down. And 10 days later, the absorption, the yellowy veining disappeared. The yellow vein on the older leaves are still there, but the new leaves are fine. So that's just, I'm saying maybe you need more fertilizer if you get that. Maybe.
I should probably let Ron take that one. Ron, you want to address that?
Yeah, I think good gardening practices like fertilizing when you start to see some yellowing, that kind of thing, can mask the presence of the virus.
I'm done and get this one done.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not there, Bob.
I'll see what happens in a few weeks if it comes back.
Yeah. I don't have much of any obvious symptoms. And as you know, I grow a fair number of virus plants basically in a controlled location so that I can study it. And I have very, very few symptoms, even though I know I have virus. And I think that's because I'm starting to follow Tony's counsel more and get a little organic fertilizer on them, stuff like that.
I think you got to remember that the plant has an immune system, and it can keep it at bay for periods of time. And when it's under stress, either from too much rain or not enough rain or too much heat or whatever, that then the symptoms a lot of times will manifest itself. And a lot of times the new growth does look good because the virus isn't traveling as fast and getting the new growth like it does when it shows up on the older growth. But like Ron says, if it's infected, it's probably still infected. It definitely is worth watching, Bob.
Agreed. I'm harvesting the leaves and it's going in the garbage, not the compost.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's 7:05 and Rich is on, and Misty made an appearance. So now I feel like if Misty's here, we can start. So I've had the pleasure to get to know Rich a little better. He's on the cut flower committee with me for the American Dahlia Society. And he has hybridized some of my all-time favorite flowers, not just for show, they'll win for show, but they also make amazing cut flowers that last a really long time in the vase. So Rich, I'm going to hand it over to you. And one more thing, if you guys are not muted, please mute yourselves. Otherwise, I will help to mute you. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. Hey, Jess, thanks for the nice introduction. And good seeing many of you I know from shows or I've seen on ADS. So good seeing y'all, and those who I don't know, good meeting you online. So yeah, and just a couple comments about the virus too. You know, like it's something that since Ron and Nick and I forget the lady in Portland have been like really pushing this with ADS. I've been pretty hypersensitive about it, and I'm definitely a when in doubt, throw it out guy. And I would say, unfortunately, more than half of what I brought into my garden this year from outside sources other than my garden, I've already thrown out. You know, and I think that it's kind of consistent with the study that Ron and others published last year. So it's unfortunate, you know. I think if there's virus that isn't bad, and I don't notice it, I'll keep it. But if it's there, I just prefer not to have it, especially since I'm a hybridizer. So I thought, even before I get into the PowerPoint, I thought I'd just quickly take you guys outside in the 88-degree heat of Washington, D.C. So I'm going to go on mute here and turn on my phone and take a quick walk outside.
It's making the Ohio weather look way better if it's 88 degrees. All right, Rich, I think you're good to go.
All right, cool. So I'm going out my back door and then I will switch it to the other mode. So I'm just going to show you, I'll present a little bit more of this in the presentation, but I'm just going to show you like what I got here in my almost urban garden here. And I think that's another thing Jess and I have in common is I don't have a lot of property, and I'm less than a mile from DC in suburban Maryland. And therefore I don't have a ton of property. Let's see if I can get this to, let's see. I'm getting it to go the other way. There we go. All right, so I'm kind of, this is 20th Ave, so that's where I get my names of my new introductions. And then this is my plot, you know, kind of my messy backyard too. So I have 5 54 by 5 foot rows and in the backyard, and that's where the majority of my introductions and my hybridizing takes place. So first row, and I'll get in there a little bit, but you can see the yellow tags. The yellow tags are cuttings. The yellow and orange tags are cuttings that are also pot roots. And I do notice I plant my cuttings a little bit closer together, and they just do a lot better in the early season heat. And my theory is that when they shade out the sun from the soil's a lot cooler and just the plants respond a lot better than that. So even though the cuttings were planted at the same time as the tubers on the opposite end of the row, the cuttings are doing a lot better and lush, full, bushy plants. Whereas you can see in the middle, I got tiny little plants still that are still stressed by this heat that won't take off for a couple of weeks yet. So first row is balls, second row is miniature balls, third row is miniature formal decks, fourth row is BB formal decks, and then the fifth row is my first year seedlings. And I plant these, yeah, I'll get in there a little bit. So the seedlings here, I have 80 rows of 4. So it's 320 this year. They're 6 inches apart. You know, some of them have already been pulled. There aren't that many blooms. Some of them will be pulled. You see that does not clock or whatever. It's downward facing. It's got an open center. So a bunch of these aren't going to make it. This white one might be okay. We'll see. It's got okay form. But my experience is that any seedling that starts to bloom this early generally isn't that good. But about half of these are from ball and miniature balls, and the other half are from, you know, decoratives, either miniature or BB formal decoratives. So they are pretty tight here, but I think they also do pretty well because they are so tight and not a lot of sunlight gets to the ground. And you can see in here, you know, like these are not, you know, a lot of sun still gets to my my ground here. And the soil's in the upper 70s, unfortunately. And it's just because it's so hot here. We've been 90 every day, and we've had a couple days over 100 already. Now there's a couple blooms in there, but there really aren't that many good blooms in there. So this is the majority of my plot. So this is the backyard plot. I've started, well, you'll see in my presentation, I worry about losing stuff. So I have a little pot root plot. So everything that I have any love for is in a pot, like right in this corner, right by my house. So this is a really brutal place to grow because it's right by a brick wall. So it's the hottest place in the garden. But I've got about 50 pot roots here that is basically just for insurance. You know, they do bloom. The blooms aren't that great, but for insurance purposes for next year, or if I do want to have a lot of stock, you know, I can take cuttings from these pot roots. But I think if people are serious about trying to keep things that they really like Aggie White or something, but whatever you have that's hard to keep, I definitely recommend doing pot roots. My new project is a BID seedling project. So I've been doing this for a couple of years, but I've got these side beds. So these are 18 feet. There's 3 of these beds here, and here's 40 of these seedlings here. Nothing so far has come out good. This one looks like it's got a decent sized bud, so we'll see. Yeah, and then some of the these are just the name varieties here that, you know, my favorite variety at the moment, and it makes a lot of seed, so I'm growing a lot of it. And then I have some A and AA IDs here in the last row here, and this is like one of the ones that unfortunately was virus, and I just pulled out earlier this week, which made me sad. But here are these plants here. And then my last plot is a tiny little plot in the front yard. And this is where I used to have the singles and the orchid type dahlias. But I decided I wanted to try to, every year at our tuber sales in the spring, a lot of people are like, can I grow it in a pot? Can I grow it in a pot? And most dahlias you really can't grow in a pot. So I started taking seed last year from Tahoma Sarah B, which, if anyone knows that dahlia, it's a very low growing, 2 feet, and it does grow in a pot. And I've got 40 seeds from that, but even that is still producing taller plants. And we'll see. The first 4 rows are pretty short, so we'll see if any of them do have some nice, fully double flowers. And then I've got other short varieties here. Got Happet Palm, the sickly one there is Tahoma Sarah B, and then a couple of my shorter seedlings that I've got here. So that's my patch, or my 3 patches, I would say, that I grow here in my garden at home. And I have, it's 320, let's see, it's about 400 total first year seedlings, including the BID and the short plant, and then first year seedlings. And then about 200 other, of which 90% are seedlings, or seedlings or introductions of mine. And I do try to introduce a little bit into the gene pool, because I think that is a good idea, but I'm still looking for reliable ways to get, good stock. I don't know if anybody has any questions before I go back inside.
Unmute yourself.
Are you raising for cuttings, or you just raising the tubers?
I'm raising, you mean, am I gardening for I'm gardening for tubers, but I'm hybridizing. So I'm looking to get good varieties here. So like of these 400 first year varieties, maybe first year, seedlings, maybe I'll save maybe 20. And then the second, third, fourth year seedlings that I have, which is most of what's the rest of the garden is, I'm just going to continue to evaluate them until I decide to introduce them or send them to the trial gardens or start benching them.
Rich, I really appreciate the tour. Thanks. Where do you get your netting?
It's actually, well, you guys can see here. You see my orange shirt? I'm a proud Baltimore Orioles fan. So this Hortonova netting is actually made in Baltimore. you can't buy it from Baltimore, but that's where it's made. I think I got it from Greenhouse Megastore or Johnny's. I got it from one of the big places, but I got like a lifetime supply. And
Right,
I
yeah.
reuse it a lot though. I don't, like when it starts breaking, let me turn this around again.
Ron, Greenhouse Mega Stores where I bought mine. I use the same netting.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
I end up using a ton of cable ties. There's cable ties everywhere. So sometimes just to make it more taut, but sometimes to deal with this is broken here. And, so I continually use it, and then just, I raise it in the winter. I have taken it down in the winter, but that's just a lot of work. But netting, it's a lot when you have so many dahlias. Tying this many dahlias is just too much. I have a full-time job, so I can't be tying all the time. Cutting blooms is difficult through netting, but doable.
Do you have to dig out your tubers in the winter, or is it warm enough to survive?
Yes. Well, they do come back, like even last year when we did have that one brutal cold spell in December, I still had tons of volunteers that I thought I had dug everything up, but I do dig up, and I try to divide as much as I can in, I dig up generally between Thanksgiving and the middle of January. So it's kind of late, and it's even late. Most of the members of our club do dig earlier than that, but I do dig, and especially for the stuff that I want, I definitely dig.
We would be covered in snow here in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, we did not have any snow last year. Which for me, a native Buffalonian, it's hard to fathom years without snow. But in DC, there's years we don't get snow. All right, any other go ahead, Jess.
What are the plastic bottles for?
The plastic bottles are for so that when I bend down, I don't poke out my eyes.
That makes
I should make them look better, but it's rebar underneath there. So I'd like I've had them hit my face before. I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna take precautions so I don't get them in my eye.
You don't want to get impaled, right?
That's correct. Yep. All right, well, let me head back inside.
Rich, do you ever shade your dahlias?
I do, actually. Let me go back out here. So I don't use shade cloth. Like if you can see, like I'm in a pretty tight neighborhood here, so there's people everywhere. So I think shade cloth might be a little bit disruptive. But starting in mid-August, I have 20 to 30 umbrellas out here, and especially for purple and dark red and and things that I want to show, even into mid-September, I'll keep the umbrellas up.
And do you use drip line, or is that a hose?
I do use drip line. I've recently taken it out for most of the garden, and I'm in the process of reinstalling it. That's my project for this weekend, because when I first turned it on this year, the amount of holes and spraying and all of that, and so I'm in the process of resetting it up. But I do use drip irrigation with the timer, and we've been really fortunate, so I haven't felt too pressured. In the last 30 days, we probably had 10 inches of rain, and it's been fairly regular. We had almost an inch last night. Oops. All right, I'm gonna head back inside.
Hey, congratulations on your Orioles being in first place.
Oh, you might have to say that again, Bob.
Hey, congratulations on your Baltimore Orioles being in first place.
I know, it's been a long time. Other than early April, it's been 20 years probably or so. As long as I've lived here, I don't remember them being in first place for long, but it's pretty fun to watch them. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen now. All right. So my dahlia seedling adventure. This one. So just kind of like a little bit about how I got into dahlias. I kind of grew up with them. My grandpa grew dahlias. He was a transplant from Nebraska. During the Dust Bowl, his dad lost the farm, and he went to college and ended up getting an engineering degree and worked in Pittsburgh first, and then in Buffalo after that. And so he was a gardener, and he always grew dahlias. And all late summer into fall, every visit to Grandpa's house was a walk through the dahlia patch, and he was so proud of it. And I do remember I don't know that he was in a club, and I don't know if they had a club in Buffalo, but I do remember he did show them at the county fair, and whatever. We were all like, wow, these are amazing. So I knew about dahlias. I didn't actually start growing them myself as an adult until I bought my first house in Baltimore in 2001, and then down here in 2005. And then randomly I saw an article in the Washington Post about a dahlia show, and I was like, oh, what's that? So I went by, I ran into Harry Rosetto, who's a dahlia ambassador, and he kind of talked my ear off. Oh, you got to come check out the club. And ever since then, I've been kind of hooked on dahlias and on the club. And I've enjoyed being in a club, probably like you all do, and hanging out and talking dahlias with folks. And especially, I think the best thing that we have here in our club is we have a trial garden, and we have a core group of people. There's regular people every week, but probably 20 people that come in and out throughout the season. And it's just a lot of fun to hang out in the garden with folks there. I got into seedlings. John Spangenberg, who some of you know, the Crazy for Dahlias guy, he was the only person growing seedlings. And, a lot of other people in the club are like, oh no, seedlings are terrible. They all suck. You're never going to get any good ones. And then John was like, no, there's lots of fun in growing seedlings. The novelty of seeing something new every day is really worth it. And, he had this string of introductions from the same pod, believe it or not, and I was just like, boy, that's amazing. So, he was kind of pushing on this, hey, palms, it's a great form and produces a lot of seed. And I was just like, okay, well, let me give it a try. But I started with open center just because it seemed like it was easy to do. And I had a couple introductions I did over that, but that wasn't as fun or as challenging, I think. And then I decided, well, I'm going to start taking seed from palms. And in 2013, I grew up, in addition to the other dahlias I was growing, I grew a bunch of palms, including little willow, pop willow, ginger willow, tiny, and then my favorite palm, which is Stoneleigh Joyce. But that first year, only ginger willow made seed. And I'll also point out there, and I'll mention these folks later here, but before this time, I had seen the Steve and Sandy Bowley's Washington Dahlia Society PowerPoint presentation on hybridizing somewhere on the internet before it was put on the ADS website. And I remember them saying, hey, that's one of the seed parents that that and RJR. There were a couple that they recommended. It's like, oh, well, let me try that, because that particular shade of orange isn't my favorite, but I was just like, oh, let me try it. But I did get seed from it. So I did put it out. And I just want to kind of like go through kind of like what I see as some of the main forms of hybridization. There's kind of like two schools. There's like closed cross hybridization. By cross hybridization, it's just different dahlia cultivars. And then open cross hybridization. The closed is when you're doing it with hand pollination, covering your blooms, transferring pollen, from the pollen parent to the seed parent, and making sure that insects or the wind or any other way plants are not getting pollinated. And, two of the folks that you all know, Christine Albrecht and Ted and Margaret Kennedy, are some of the folks that do this hand pollinating and do this closed cross hybridization. I'd say most folks do open cross hybridization of different kinds. It's basically letting the bees and the other insects do the work. The Bowleys, who I mentioned earlier, practice the separation method, which is keeping different dahlia forms separate from other different dahlia forms. So the Bowleys, and I would say another famous person is Barry Davies from England, the barberry dahlias, and there's plenty of other folks that do this, but they do this kind of separation method. I've read about the tunnel method, where people put fine netting along rows of plants. So you're kind of funneling the bees and the insects into where you want them to go. So it's not so different from separation, but you probably could have different forms closer to them, but just separated by this netting. And then there's just open, like you have all your dahlias, you're letting the bees go wherever they want to go and pollinate. I think it's harder to get, the forms you want there, but there's plenty of success in that method also. For me, when I decided to start doing this in 2013, I decided, okay, I'm going to do this separation method. I have a set of favorites. I'm going to my favorite forms on ball and min ball and palms. I will separate them from other forms. And you didn't see any cactus dahlias. I like them, but I don't grow them unless I get more property. I'm not growing forms, like water lilies or stellars or cactus or open centers anymore, because I think there is a bigger risk to what the outcome will be, and then so starting there, over the years, I basically included decks with the palms and the miniature balls, as there is some spectrum of form there, and doing that. And also here, I hope there's no yellow lovers here, but I avoid yellow, it's super common. I think it does attract more bugs, and I just don't like yellow. So I don't grow, even though I do have some yellow flowers, and it's unavoidable, but it's not my favorite. And I used to grow the open centers in the front yard. This is kind of like what someone asked about, do I shade my dahlias? This is kind of what the garden looks like later in the season when I'm about to start taking seed, so I do shade, some of the, dark, I didn't have the umbrella up, but like the darker colored dahlias here, and wherever else I think I need to shade here. So that's what it looks like more. And I don't know if this is September, October. It's probably sometime in September. So, and I think just finally on how do I define success with hybridization? Obviously, I think form is the most important thing. I want a high petal count. I want good symmetrical placement of the florets, tight centers, true to form as possible, even though Brookside Snowball is one of my favorites, and that's obviously not true to form. Good color, either bright, clear colors or soft pastel colors, but not streaky, not splotchy. And I'm also looking to try to get cultivars that'll grow well here in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And my garden, as you saw, it is full sun from the morning till the night. My neighbors have a couple of mulberry trees, but those only work until about 8 a.m. Other than that, I have sun all day long. Strong, straight, and long stems. I also like stems that have color as opposed to green, like purple or dark red. I think that is kind of a nice contrast to a lot of the colors of the blooms. Nice, well-formed foliage. Again, I like darker foliage. I'd like to have more purple, but at least dark green. Floriferous, lots of blooms, produces lots of tubers that keep well. I prefer tall plants that don't require tons of bending. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I don't want to be, even though I'm growing some short varieties here, I do want to mostly breed for 6 feet tall or 5 to 6 feet tall. And then I am interested in keeping my stuff either virus free or, trying to work with, the whole bunch of hybridizers and working through virus resistant new cultivars. So getting back to the ginger willow. So 2014 was the first year that I actually kind of really got serious about this, and I had this one seedling came out of ginger willow. It was a light blend or pink miniature ball. I showed it a couple of times. It won blue ribbons at the Montgomery County Fair and the NCDS main show. And I was just like, oh, you know what? I'm going to keep growing this and see what happens. And I grew it again in 2015, but I noticed that the stem was a little curved, you know, and it kind of like my theory was, you know, since it was from palm stock, you know, when palms produce miniature balls or balls, I think there was a risk to the stem just because there's so many petals, you know, and I think this is generally true that palms have more petals than other forms. So Nick Weber, who some of you know, suggested, hey, why don't you try it as a seed parent? And I decided what I would do it. And I'll say, even before I show you them, most of my introductions have actually come from this parent, from this 1406 out of Ginger Willow. I did a little math, and this is a messy chart, and I know Jerry's a statistician, so sorry about how messy this is here, but I just kind of wanted to know, like, what does, you know, this separation method produce? You know, so I have this, you know, light blend, pinkish, cool color miniature ball that I'm seeding, and this is just data from a couple years, you know, like, what does it produce? And as opposed to like keeping to look at this table, you know, I think the things that really what it showed is that the number one thing is the size of the offspring was really similar to miniature size, you know, and it was about 70, if you include, you know, the open centers and the semi-doubles, you know, 70–80% of them were actually that same size. You know, a third of them were miniature balls, a quarter of them were miniature formal decks, a smaller amount were balls or BB formal decks. About 25% of them were semi-double or open center. And by semi-double, I just mean it has an open center and then it has some amount of rows of petals, you know, generally more than 5, but you know, in the previous slide, I code them as peony, but, you know, they could have 15 rows of petals, but they still have an open center. And I also saw the color was generally the same. Almost all of them, you know, almost 90% were cool colored, you know, cool colors, you know, so white, purple, light blend, lavender, dark pink, pink, dark blend, you know, and then some amount were red, yellow, or orange, but not a lot, you know, and even though one of the grandparents was orange, you know, they still kept to that cool color. You know, and then this is just starting. So I've reused some of this presentation from a presentation I did in 2019, just looking at some of the seedlings that I got, you know, from 16 and on. You know, this was one, I never saved it. This was one I ended up saving. You know, this is actually still my most successful introduction so far, 20th Ave Ingrid, which, you know, you could tell it's got some palm in it for sure. And it is a small miniature ball, which grows pretty well, but especially the further north, the better it does. It does have some fading issues in the summer here in Maryland. I grew this one, which at the time when I first grew it from 2017, I was thinking it was a ball. It ended up scoring as a miniature formal deck, and this is 20th Ave and Baker Road, with a nod to my grandfather who lived on Baker Road. You know, this is one that I thought I liked at the time. I don't know what happened to it. I didn't keep it. You know, as with most of them, they don't last forever. This is another one that I was like, oh, this one's really good. At the time, I thought it was a miniature ball. This ended up being 20th Ave Gwen, which was also introduced and did well in the trial gardens. Another one that, you know, I thought was a miniature ball when it first came out in 2017, but this one ended up being 20th Ave Memory as a pink ball, which I think the cut flower people especially like this, but it's a nice bloom and a nice soft pink color. And this is another one that when I first saw it in 2018, I was like, ooh, tons of petals, you know, tight center. You know, I put, you know, I have this app on my phone that I can label things in the photos, it's a really great app, and I actually have to download it again. But so this is immediately when I was coding it the first year. So 1808, the 8th seedling that I decided to keep from 2018. You know, it's a miniature ball white, and my comment was, ooh, high petal count. And this eventually ended up being 20th Ave Tradition, which is another introduction that's out there, and I think the cut flower and the wedding people really like. And there were other ones that at the time, I was like, ooh, that's good. But you could see the center's a little funky. It's got this green center and some color breaks in there too. So at some point after this year, I did throw that out. And here's some of the ones that are still kind of in my garden that I haven't decided what to do. This is the 2019 seedling. It's another 19 seedling, which I like the color. The center's a little funky, but I really like the color here. 2020, another 2020, got a double center there. 2021, another 2021 ball or miniature ball. See how dark purple that stem is too, which I really like a lot. So those are some of the seedlings. These are all descended from this 1406, one way or the other, either directly or a couple generations. But in hybridizing, some of the seedlings are not good. This one kind of down facing, mixed form on the florets, a lot like this, this is almost, who knows, this is even kind of like, what's that NX variety with those weird petals, but obviously a huge big
Valley porcupine.
Valley porcupine, exactly. Yeah. And this obviously, these don't last long in my garden. So after the first bloom, they get dug up and composted. And it's not uncommon, and I think I used to get more of them when I did have the open centered flowers in the front yard. Now I don't have those anymore. But I still get about 20% open centered, even without open centered pollen anywhere near them. And some of them are just plain ugly, like just this poor thing wanted to be a single and, wanted to even put out florets inside the disc, and not a keeper. So back, and this is again from, and just to kind of show kind of some of my thought process here, and this has been my thought process ever since then too. It's just, in the main garden, the backyard, it's malls, balls, miniature balls, formal decoratives. That year I planted the last of my seeds from 1406. I lost the stock that winter, which is part of the reason why I have all those pot roots now, because I don't want to ever lose any stock again. And I've been planting seed from the offspring of 1406. And I'll just mention, I mentioned Barry Davies a little bit earlier there. He puts out an email newsletter, to whoever wants to get it. And maybe 5 or 6 years ago, he had this one article that really caught my attention, which went through the history of his hybridizing. And what I found interesting is, like, his plan was he was very attracted to balls and decks also, mostly miniatures and also BB. But his plan was he's going to start with some of the best stuff they have in England, then start taking seed of it. Over the first 5 years, he basically went from all outside cultivars to all of his own. So everything that he's breeding, this is maybe 20 or 25 years ago now, but he's basically started from there. But when he starts getting good stuff, he's using his stock to keep breeding. And from the Barberries, they're not so different, over the years, but he continues to put really good stuff out and has some control over, he's got these super high petal counts. He does have a lot of mixed form, but he's got really good introductions. And I've kind of decided that that's a good strategy, even though I do like bringing in a little bit of genetic diversity every year. So maybe, less than 5%, but I would say some amount of new introductions, or not new introductions, some amount of outside genetic material into my garden every year. At that point, these were 3 of my favorite seed parents. So Brookside Snowball, which continues to be a favorite, that's just a really good dahlia. And I know it's mixed form, but that's a really good dahlia. It's got a ton of petals, it's a strong plant, it produces good tubers, and for being a white flower, it does put off a lot of different colors from its seed too. For a few years, I did Chimicum del Bloma, which is a really dark purple. I didn't really end up having a lot of success with it, so I don't use that as a seed parent anymore. And then Frank Holmes is one of the palms that I've been using ever since then. That doesn't have the best form anymore, but it does make seed, and I've gotten some good miniature decoratives or miniature balls out of Frank Holmes there. I did try some English formal decks, that year. So Sefton Silvertop, it just doesn't do well in hot weather. So that was the only year that I grew it and took seed from it. But Dicara Superb, that's a good seed parent, and it grows well, it takes the heat well, makes a lot of seed, and it doesn't produce balls. It only produces, miniature and BB formal decks. But this is what I started doing in 2019, and I'll show you a little bit more about what I'm doing this year. I also was, for a couple of years, I was like, okay, I've got these two introductions, 20th Ave Estrella, which was a dark red orchid, and 20th Ave Sunset, which was an orange single with dark foliage. And I was like, well, let me keep breeding these two against each other and only have these two. And will I get a dark foliaged orchid? I did it for 3 years and I didn't get one. So I kind of gave up on that. I hope that someone does get some dark foliaged orchids or dark foliaged, collarets or other open centers, but it's probably not going to be me. And in 2019, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try some miniature and BB cactuses too. And that's how my side plot started. Is I got 5 of the Jasudi varieties from England, which were all miniature cactus or miniature semi-cactus. I grew Embrace. I grew, I can't see the bottom of my screen. Itara Caress and CG Coral is just some of the cactuses that I like. I did this for a couple of years and I kind of gave up on it. I wasn't getting anything that I really liked, but I had to give it a go. And maybe someday in the future, I'll take that back up. But I stopped that and I switched to the B and A and AA informal decks instead. But that's what I was thinking in 2019. And some of the stuff that I've got this year and last year comes out of that. Now, like I think having plans and goals, plans that come out of your goals. So I'm going to continue to hybridize balls, miniature and BB formal decoratives. That's my main joy and that's my favorite form. But now I'm committing to this BID project, and we'll see how the first 40 come out, but I hope to have a couple hundred BID seedlings next year. And then hybridize these short miniature ball and maybe miniature formal decks for pots. And this is largely just for, the general public who comes to our tuber sales in the spring and wants to grow in pots. And we have to say, well, there's only 2 varieties you can grow for pots if you don't want to grow open center. And then I want to learn more about and experiment with virus resistance. I became attracted to this. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I don't know if it was last year or the year before. Keith Hammett did a podcast with somebody. I don't even know which podcast it was. But, he was pretty convinced that some of the old time varieties have virus resistance. I think the one that he mentioned, Kids Climax, was the one that he mentioned that, just seems to be okay. It doesn't have enough petals, but it seems to be fine and doesn't show a lot of virus, and he has this hypothesis that that's one of many of the old time varieties that might have virus resistance. And as opposed to, really, I don't know, just focusing on form and color and these other attributes of the dahlia, it might be a good idea to also think about virus resistance. In that, I think he also thinks that a lot of the new introduction cultivars, even though they won't have virus the first year, they're doomed to virus failure soon after they're introduced. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think it's an interesting theory. So I want to just experiment more with this virus resistance and see where that goes. So I showed you guys my garden. That's what it is. So it's balls. The backyard plot is balls, miniature formal decks, BB formal decks, and then the first year seedlings that are half ball, miniature ball, and half BB and miniature formal decks. Side yard is the informal decoratives, some seedlings, and the A and the AA informal decoratives. And then the front yard plot, in addition to the butterfly weed, has these short plants, including 40 seedlings from Tahoma Cerebi. So just in terms of growing seedlings, I'm not gonna stay on the screen for much. I'm just going to kind of go through and show some photos of all of this, and I'll talk through it because I have it on another screen here. So I'd say number one, you got to grow quality dahlias. Like if you grow bad stuff, if you grow dahlias that don't have a lot of petals, you can't expect a lot of petals. So I think that's really important. Dispose of the dahlias that exhibit signs of virus. I think, Ron's been the big proponent of when in doubt, throw it out. I think it's just good, especially if you're going to be a hybridizer. It's not clear that virus does pass through seed, but, I just don't think bad plants aren't likely to grow good seedlings. Allow some of the blooms to get pollinated by the bees, or even try hand pollinating. During COVID, that summer when I couldn't go to work, I had lots of time to take breaks all day and hand pollinate. And I got some good seed that year, and I'm still growing that out. And, maybe when I retire, I'll have more time to try doing that again. But even, so there's the hand pollinating with the brush, but even other methods, you can smush, you can take blooms inside, wait for the pollen to mature on that, and then kind of even smush them together with the slightly less ripe blooms that are outside, and preferably cover them with some of the organza so that you don't have the bees interfering with what you're trying to do. Or even, using a stake and even zip tying a vase full of the blooms right next to where you want them to be pollinated, to have the bees do the work, but you can even help them even more than planting close together. You can put some blooms in some water for a week and they will go back and forth and pollinate the ones that are still in the ground. Allow the seed pods to form. I just have, this photo is of ripe seed pods. They've changed color. They're not green really anymore. They started to show a little bit of red there. Dry the seed pod. For me, I put them in paper bags and dry them in the basement in a dark room there. And then when you have some free time, shuck the seed out of the pods. You can get a fair amount of seed. I think football games are a perfect time to take seed out of pods, because there's a lot of boring times during football. So that's often what I do in December or January when I want to start taking some seed there. Then, for me, and you guys are probably a little bit later than I am here. And I've even changed the time that I do it over the last couple of years with this, with the climate change that we're experiencing here. But I usually start my seed the first week of March with the goal of putting it out the third week of April. So my seedlings are the first thing that I plant. And the reason that is, I do watch carefully for frost, but I think seedlings are the most susceptible. If we have a string of 90 or 95 degree days in mid-June, I want my seedlings to have roots. The tubers are going to be fine. So I don't worry about them as much. So I plant I plant my seedlings before I plant my tubers, which is different than a lot of people further north, that they like planting their tubers first and their seedlings next. But it's too risky here, because we could have, every day could be 90 in June, and every day is 90 in July. So I like getting my seedlings going early. I place them on paper towel, keep them wet, put them in a little sandwich bag, and between 4 and 15 days, they will start sprouting, and over time, I've noticed about 40% of the seed that I save does sprout. I'm not sure why it's so low, but that's what it's been almost every year, between like 35 and like 41 or 42%. That's what I get in terms of seed germination. So soon after sprouting, transplant them into some seedling mix, or I use Pro Mix. I have a light, I have fluorescence in my basement, so I let them grow in 72 trays in the basement, and then I transplant again, either into 8-ounce cups or 2-inch pots, and that's the last that they'll be in before they get transplanted into the garden. So this is kind of like when it's time to go. This is late April, This is a few years back, but this is when I was still using cups. So if you look closely, like I have whatever the name is here or the number, because often they're just a number. They're seedlings of seedlings. So I've got them in cups ready to go. I do. Yeah, see, you can see my drip tape here. 4 across, 6 inches each way. I use a bulb planter, which is the same exact size as an 8-inch cup. It's a tiny bit bigger than the 2-inch pots, but I can easily just quickly use the bulb planter, make the holes. I don't drop the pots in, obviously, but this is just an example of how perfectly the size is that the 8-ounce cups fit right into those holes. And this is kind of like what it looks like. So I do have the drip tape in between two. This is probably 2019 or 2018. I was planting 8 inches apart then. I've since gone down to 6 inches, and I think 6 inches is fine. I don't have any trouble with there. I probably dug out 20 so far, but before August 15th, I probably will have gotten rid of 100 of the 400, just because the first seedlings, the first blooms, you're able to tell if it's got an open center, it's not going to work, and then I get rid of that. So that's that, and I would say here's just some of the success. This 1629 at the 2018 National Show, I actually got to the Court of Honor, so it's pretty cool. And growing seedlings, I'll just say too, it's a lot of fun. One of the things that I think we get as dahlia growers is novelty, and from seedlings, every day from early July until, and here in DC, we might not get frost until Thanksgiving, but almost every day until the end of October, I'm seeing a new dahlia that I've never seen before. And admitted, a lot of them are not that great, but it's really fun. And when I go out in the morning, and especially I would say late August, all of September and the first couple of weeks of October, it is just such a treat, and it's a really fun thing, and I've enjoyed it a lot, and I continue to do it. And I think over the next few years, I'm going to look for some more land so I can do it even more, but it's a real joy. So that's what I have for the presentation. I'm open to questions. I see there was some comments in the chat, and I'll just say, if people do want to contact me too, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Reddit, I'm on Threads. Here's my email address. I go to a lot of shows. So every year I go to the Maryland State Fair, the Gettysburg Show, the Philadelphia Show, the Rochester Show, and the National Capital Shows. I go to any national show that's on the East Coast or in the Midwest. That's where I've met a lot of you all. And this year I am going to go to the Midwest Conference Show in Pittsburgh, and I look forward, and I'm sure I'll see a lot of you there. And then if anybody's interested in my introductions, you'll find them other places, but I introduce them through Crazy for Dahlias, John Spangenberg. So I'll take any questions or comments. Let's see what we got on the chat here. Crazy. Okay, yeah, that was just a question about where my interests are. So any questions or comments or?
Did you see an increase in interest in dahlias during COVID?
I don't think it's just during COVID. I think actually social media is responsible for a lot of it, especially Instagram, but the last 5 or 6 years, I think has been crazy increased interest in dahlias, but COVID was some of it with the more gardening. I think in growing dahlias, I think COVID helped, but in dahlias and having dahlias, I think social media has helped a lot, and I know Misty and Jess are on Instagram. I'm sure some of the rest of you are too, but, just the amount of dahlia fans that are watching all of us and, someone like Christine and, Florette and, just tons of, dahlia influencers, I think is really spreading dahlias more than anything else could.
Hey, Rich, this is Ron. I don't throw away enough of my seedlings. I think you throw away too many. Geez, some of that stuff you didn't keep was pretty seemed pretty nice to me. I don't think I could have given up on them like you did.
Yeah.
What's your criteria for throwing them out?
I like scoring, like I'm a
Yeah.
senior judge and I'm also the chair of judging for our society. So I do score them, like I think
Uh-huh.
there's the basic criteria is if they are open centered, they're gone,
Yeah.
like I do pay attention to color next and then the stem, like I think those things. And I think for form, if it's not better than what's already out there, or at least competitive with what's already out there, I'm not going to keep it.
But you do put them in shows routinely, right? I mean,
I
you
do
show
put them in shows routinely, and I will
Yeah.
say too that some of my introductions only came out because of others. I do. So two of them in particular. So 20th Ave Member, the pink ball, and 20th Ave Softer Peach. Neither one of them were going to get introduced, but for both of them, two of my friends. So John Spangenberg grows and introduces my, and I think he likes my introductions more than I do, and then. And then Christine Albrecht was growing Softer Peach, and I was definitely getting rid of it, and she's like, "You're crazy. You definitely have to introduce that." And I ended up introducing it, and it's done fairly well. And I'll say I didn't mention this too much, but I do like having people grow my seedlings before they're introduced, especially in different climates. So I have probably right now I have a half dozen. My brother still lives in Western New York, so he gets a lot of my seedlings every year, and I do maintain a patch up there. He's got 40 acres, so he's got a lot of land. So I'm able to get up there and grow seedlings there. But I send them to the West Coast. Jess has some of mine this year. A bunch of people in this area have them because I do want other people to see them and have that other impression. So I do take them to shows, like in the past I have put them in the trial gardens, but I do think it's valuable to get other people's opinions. And also, since I have brutal growing conditions in my backyard here, like I do need other people to see if they can do better,
Yeah. Thank you.
And I'll say, Rich, your seedlings are doing so good. So
I appreciate that.
you also didn't have a picture of my all-time favorite, one of yours, which is 20th Ave Old Major.
Yeah.
And if the petals on that just go for days, and when you think it's mature, give it like another 4 days, and it's still going. It's so pretty.
Yeah, no, that's a really nice one. If you look at it closely too, so that's the child of Brookside Snowball. I think they are very similar. It has a few more petals than Brookside Snowball, but they're very similar there. And this is like the unique seedling that I have that no matter what, or now it's an introduction, it only produces one seed. And I think it's partially because there's so many petals and that center is so tight. I've never been able to get more than one seed out of a bloom, which that's pretty frustrating.
Rich, can I ask a question? From the senior judge perspective and having a ball with lots of petals, when you bring it to a show, what is the expectation that center will be at what stage of maturity? So I felt like I brought a ball to a show once that had so many petals, and it's hard to understand. Oh, sorry, I'm hearing feedback. It's hard to kind of figure out what's just because it has so many petals versus being immature.
Yeah. Well, I know there's other senior judges here, but like my opinion is that we're supposed to prefer mature blooms, and so I people do show a lot of immature blooms, and the immature blooms do have advantages in color for sure, because they're fresher and they've had less exposure to the sun. But I think, the best, for a show flower, the best show flower is hours before it's going to pop. That's the perfect flower, and I think that's our dream, but it's painful too, because a lot of them pop on the way to the show or while you're setting it up or between the time you set it up and it gets judged. But I think having a fully mature bloom, and it's the center should still be tight, but you want those petals to go all the way back to the stem too. And I would say that's another, Ron mentioned, how do you determine grow things out? If it doesn't go all the way back to the stem, I'm not keeping it. And I think there is, and I learned this more as a tomato grower, but when you grow hybrid tomatoes and then you grow the seeds from them, they revert. And I think that's the same in dahlias. That's why most of the seedlings aren't as good as the parent, because they're reverting back, or they're devolving back. And I think it's important that, we have to be selective and try to keep that high petal count, and for shows, bring them mature, and you can bring in mature blooms, but they should be marked down.
And I came outside because, Rich, I have some good examples of one of yours. Now I just need to figure out how to turn the camera on. So this is 20th Ave Old Major.
That's looking good.
Yeah, and your Pure Prince is another fave. So yes, they're all looking great.
How far apart are your plants, Jess? I'm just curious, because it's so lush.
They are very close, 12 inches.
12 inches, okay.
So yeah, they're pretty tight in there.
But it's very lush.
It is. I have been using fish fertilizer, fish and seedweed fertilizer, and I think this was my best year so far, knock on wood. So everything's looking real good. Other questions? I know Max is on, and he is just kind of starting his hybridizing journey. Max, I don't know if you have any questions for a brand new hybridizer. He's probably like, don't call on me. Well, Rich, I also just started this year, so any tips for open pollinization? Because I don't think I have the time to do it by hand.
Yeah, I think keeping different forms separate, you probably don't grow a ton of cactus, but I think, and you don't grow open centered, I would just try to keep the forms separate. And then as you see what you get, like next year, see if you can plant the most similar next to each other.
Okay, right now it's like my hero row. So it's like Christine, yours. I have some of Tony's and Leanne's and Ron's. So the 5 of you are kind of all in a row.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would say just do it, start collecting seed, and then you can, as you do it more, I think you can worry more about what you put next to each other. But I do think separation is the way to go, unless you're going to hand pollinate, and I look forward to doing more hand pollinating, but I don't know when, because I don't have time for it now. But during the 2020, I did a fair amount of it, and I think it did produce some pretty decent results.
The other thing I appreciate, Rich, is you being willing to share the parents. I think even on, Facebook, there's a Dahlia breeding group, and it sometimes is so secretive as to make who makes good seeds. And it's tough when you're just starting out to have any kind of idea of what dahlias might make good seeds.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it. Like I'm not perfectly open, but like I do keep some secrets. But also most of my seed comes from my seedlings. So like nobody knows what that is. But there are other people like the Bowleys. Like if anybody's interested in hybridizing, tracking down the Bowleys hybridizing presentation, and I think that's now on the ADS website. That's worthwhile. They share some of their seeds. And every 5 years, the Dahlias of Today publication that the Pacific Northwest group puts out, every 5 years, they have some of the hybridizers in the Northwest give their favorite seed parents by form. So like I have all the Dahlias today, but you can even go back and, there's a group, there's generally the same ones, and they're obviously biased towards West Coast Dahlias, but I would say that's another thing. And then just another way, you just make friends. Your friends are going to tell you, I think if you're able at your club meetings or when you visit other people's gardens, you have Tony and Ron there. I'm sure they'll share some information with you. And then other people at the national shows. Who was a joy to speak with at the national show we had in DC was what's the Clearview guy's name? Parshall. He was awesome. And he was really free about sharing everything. For somebody so accomplished, that was really a treat. And not just about seed parents, but the talk that he gave on judging. Ron mentioned the how much do you save? He's hardcore. He says he introduces 1 out of 200 seedlings, 0.5%. That's what he says his ratio is. That's the lowest I've ever heard from anybody. I've heard 1%, I've heard 2%, but no, he's like 1 out of 200 are worthy of being introduced. And I'd say getting to meet these people and like these national shows too, or whatever, the Midwest Conference show, when you do have exposure to a lot of people, whether they're breeders or whether they're just experienced growers. I think just getting to meet people and talking to people. And what's the closest trial garden to you all out there? Is it Indiana probably? Yeah, I would, even if you get to take a trip there, or if they have like an open judging day or something there, that might be another good opportunity to talk to some people. What's the older guy's name? He'd probably still go up, Mac Boyer. He'd probably give up some of his old secrets, and but the rest of the crew out there, or if you ever make it to DC again at our trial garden, that's just a real great opportunity to be able to talk dahlias and talk about anything.
They've got a picnic coming up in a couple of weeks, and they do a judging thing, so that might be a good time to go.
Yeah.
Less than 4 hours, I think, from here.
The one at Elkhart, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay.
And the information's on the Midwest website.
Okay, and I'll drop that website in the chat for anyone who's not familiar with it.
So are a bunch of you going to Pittsburgh this year?
I think so.
Cool.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you all there. I'm sending in my registration form this weekend.
The competition is on, Rich.
Well, between the Pittsburgh and the Ohio people, I know I can't compete with y'all, but I do have fun anyways, because at that Ohio show, some of the blooms that y'all had were just pretty spectacular. And then when Todd came down to our show, boy, we had never seen anything like some of his blooms. And then Bob Romano, of course, Bob and Judy Romano in Pittsburgh, they have some spectacular stuff.
Well, any other questions for Rich? No? Well, Rich, thanks so much for coming tonight. This was really informative. I'm sure I'm going to watch it back and read your slides a little closer.
Cool. Very good. Well, good seeing you all, and I appreciate the honor of being able to address you tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rich. Great
All right.
presentation.
All right,
Thank
cool.
Really
Thank
great.
you.
All right. So moving on to some club business, and Rich, you're welcome to stay, or he's off. All right. So coming up soon, just a reminder that we have our picnic on August 5th. If you haven't RSVP'd yet, I would appreciate it if you did. That way Patty can get a count for the main course. So the DSO will supply the main course, and then we just ask that everybody bring your favorite dish. Ron, do you want to mention anything about the judges workshop after the picnic?
Tony and I have discussed it briefly. I'm just back from Northern Ontario, and I did put together, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 slides that I haven't sent to Tony yet because I still need to make some corrections. But we're planning on having a discussion based on the actual flowers that we have in hand. And obviously that's something I hope will be sort of a fun experience for everybody. Tony, you want to add to that?
I was going to say, I asked people to bring some nice blooms so that we could judge them. I think it'll be instructive, and we'll do a sample judging seminar right there at the picnic.
And I'd say that they don't even need to worry too much about them being great blooms. They're some of the ones that show some defects are instructive.
For sure.
Okay, so that is on the 5th of August. Then we also have the first show coming up, and Jerry, I don't know if you want to talk about Cuyahoga.
Bob Winning and Bob Matusek and I have pretty much inventoried what we have at Brant's barn and Carol's barn, and we're pretty much all set to transport the inventory to the Cuyahoga Fair on Friday. I think it's August the 4th. It's the Friday before the show. And Mike Weber and Rob Lloyd are kind of the co-chairs of the Cuyahoga Fair. You don't have to register beforehand. I'll be getting information out over the weekend. I've been a little bit behind. I lost my sister a couple weeks ago and just now kind of recovering. So we'll be transporting all of our inventory and storing it there at the barn. It's the same barn as we were at last year. For those of you who were at the Cuyahoga Fair show last year. I don't know, Bob, do you have anything to add? Do make sure it's a really nice show for new showers, new exhibitors, because it's very low key, and we have a lot of fair people come, so often they're not even familiar with how to stage. So we have a lot of good people around to help you stage if you've never staged before. Come to the show date is Saturday. What would that be? The 12th?
12th.
Yeah, Saturday, October 12th. Come about 8 o'clock in the morning. You'll I'll have it online here shortly, or information for you as to what gate to come in, and then bring your blooms down to the barn. It was a lot more convenient in years past when the flower barn was right but next to the gate. Now you've got to wander down through fair people to get to the location where we were at last year. But yeah, make sure you bring blooms. They give us $600 a year. And I think I mentioned before, you don't have to register beforehand, but you do have to register at the show. And it's, I think, a $12 registration, but we reimburse you the $12 that we take from the money that they give us, in addition to prize money for first, second, third place blooms. Bob, can you think of anything else?
No, just remind everybody, you bring bloom, make sure you got at least a pair of leaves on it with the bloom. That's what we ask for, so we can stage them that way. And there's plenty of room for newcomers, you know, novelists and small growers. So please do bring whatever you got and we'll help you set it up.
We provide the vases, so just, you know, put your blooms you're bringing in a bucket or whatever, and we'll go from there. Do make sure, as Bob mentioned, you have at least one set of leaves and long enough so that when it goes into a vase, that it will stand substantially above the top of the vase. But bring your blooms. We want quantity. Well, we want quality too, but we definitely want quantity because of the money that they give us. We really like to have a good display so as not to be embarrassed.
And if you don't know how long to cut it extra long. We got trim it down at the show when you stage.
I sent out a video in the last digest. Last year, Tony did a how to stage a bloom workshop. So if you watch that video, Tony gives you all the tips and tricks of how to stage your bloom correctly, how to like get it to the show. That's can be its own process. So if you need that link again, just email me and I'll shoot you that link. But definitely encourage anyone who hasn't gone to give it a try. It's, I think, my favorite show. You get huge ribbons if you win. So everybody loves a good large ribbon.
Good point, Jess. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something, Jerry. So on the 4th, going to move stuff from Brant's barn to the fair. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, I will certainly be available to give you a hand with that.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for the, yeah, thanks for.
Well, it's the least I can do if I'm supposed to oversee it, right?
We're meeting at Brant's barn at 9 o'clock.
Oh, well, man, I don't know if I can make that. That's a little early. Okay.
It is when you live halfway across the state.
Okay. Now, the other thing too, when we had a prior discussion about the fair, they were going to provide the tables, and that's what we were going to put the material under. Are those tables going to be there?
Yeah, they'll be all
they'll be set up on that 4th. Okay, great.
No.
Okay.
Bob, did we say 9 o'clock or did we say 10?
I think it was 10.
Let's say 10 o'clock. Let's say 10 o'clock.
What, 10 o'clock at Brant's?
At Brant's.
Oh, okay. You did say originally 9 to me.
Yeah, I know I did originally, but I would like to have Mike there too. So,
Okay.
so let's say 10.
9 o'clock, I won't be there. 10 o'clock, I will.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Thanks, guys.
Tammy and to Pat at some length about Summit, but we'll be able to get together, Pat and Tammy, over sometime in August.
Yeah.
Jerry, though, let me add, while I'm thinking about it, that it is time to register for the Jaga Fair. I'm not sure what the deadline is, but I did get an email that said it's time to register. I haven't read the email yet, but you do need to register in advance to get into the Jaga Fair.
And I am actually working on an email. Jerry just needs to approve it. that will have all the registration links, all of the dates. So everything you need to know for Geauga and Cuyahoga County. So
Great.
And
Thank you.
I think it's August the 9th, Wednesday, August the 9th, you have to register for Geauga. We could put the Geauga Fair and Cuyahoga Fair booklets URL, but I tell you that the information that they have is really confusing, I find. So what I'm going to do again over the weekend, and I'll send it to Jess to put on to send out to membership, is the Geauga form and the Geauga map, and that's all you really need to know. And we'll just have it so that you can download it without going to the fair site. The fair site, I think, is just ridiculous to try to sort through, and the information isn't completely correct, and it's not. Anyway,
You want it on the DSO site?
yeah, we'll get it to the DSO site.
Okay, copy me then. Do you want any of the banners for Cuyahoga County?
do you mean,
It's interesting. Yeah, well, I think we had the pull up.
Because I think all the banners are living at my house. And what about the black cloths?
Yeah, we need the black cloth
Oh, okay.
for the court. I think it was two sheets for the court.
Well, I don't know, they're just all in one big bin, so
Yeah,
you'll have to come and take what you want.
just bring it if you will. Jess did get a new banner, which is very nice, and I have that, so I'll take that for the court.
Okay, and then so from me, you're gonna want the pull up.
We had the pull up last year, didn't we?
Well, I mean, it's living at my house, so
And I think, I don't know if we had I don't think we had room for the trifold. But I don't remember.
I don't remember it because they put it like right down the middle of the barn.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the only thing we had was the court of honor with the banner.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. It is a little tight.
That's putting it nicely. Yes.
But do come.
Okay. And then the next event after that is the bouquet arranging workshop on August 19th. We are full. As of right now, we have 25 people registered. If you did not register, Barb snatched the last spot today. If you didn't register, but you're still interested, please fill out the form or email me. If people cancel, I will open up spots. So my hope is that it'll be a fun day. Tracy Gardner is going to kind of walk us through arranging. Please bring your own dahlia blooms. I hopefully might have some extra. And then if you have any kind of filler from your house that you want to use, hydrangeas, basils, different flowers, you can bring that with, and Tracy will kind of walk you through how to arrange a bouquet with your dahlias.
And do you want only vases as vessels, or are compotes okay?
You can bring that, sure. And I would recommend, if you're doing that, to bring like a floral frog or Oasis chicken wire. I have some of that, the Oasis. I don't know if I have an extra frog.
Oh, I've got plenty of frogs. If anybody else needs them, let me know.
Okay.
Kinsons, the proper name.
And Tracy will kind of walk us through the different mechanics. So if you don't know what a flower frog is, totally fine. If you're not sure how to use chicken wire in a vessel, totally fine. She'll kind of walk us through those steps. Okay. That is all I have. Anybody have anything else or any questions?
Yeah, Sharon, do you have artistic design for Summit and Petites?
Well, Summit's already in the book,
Okay,
and no, I don't have it for Petites. It'll be pumpkins. And I need to verify with Jess, but I'd like to at least do bouquets as exhibit, or we can do bouquets, to be judged. But I want to do something with bouquets and pumpkins, and then we'll go from there. It'll be, a couple of standard fallish things.
yeah, well, let me know about bouquets because the form is filled.
I'm sorry?
So I don't know exactly where to put information for that. I'd have to go on a second page.
Well, no, you always put that. Are you talking about
Petites.
Petites? Down in the corner, you usually just have that one little tiny box.
Yeah,
We'll just make it fit in there.
okay. Just get it to me whenever you can.
I'll use real tiny font, eight points.
Like a pill bottle.
I could do 4-point. Tony, you had something. Who was raising something?
Dwight, I think, had his hand up.
Jess, to all of you, I just want to say thank you. I'm new to Ohio after having spent the prior 24 years in Australia. I was an avid daddy goer down there, but I couldn't bring any with me. So I purchased 15 from your pot sale. What do you call it? Plant flower sale, Jess? What was the right name for it?
Yeah, the plant sale.
And I asked if anybody had any spare tubers. I wound up with 60 extra tubers. So I have wound up with a massive garden in front of my house.
Wonderful.
Of those 60 tubers, only one did not come up.
Yeah.
And only one has been virused. And so it's been pulled and pitched already. But people walking, somebody said there seems to be more interest in dahlias. I think that is very true. But people want color in their lives, particularly after COVID. Now, a lot of people, just gave up on things. And to have that color that the dahlia provides back in your life is very good for most people. Now, here I live in Lakeside, Ohio, which is out on a peninsula in Lake Erie. And Lakeside is a square mile city. My home happens to be sitting on the 1 mile walking path around Lakeside. And people come by almost every day walking past my dahlia beds. And I get more questions from people. And one lady last night complained to me that I was causing her to have a greater walking time because she was stopping to look at my dahlias on her walking around the area. But I cannot thank you guys enough for letting me get the tubers here and the plants here. And I don't know who grew it, but Morningstar was my first bloom. The orchid Morningstar was my first bloom and has just been gorgeous. Thank you, Jess.
Hey, Dwight, this has nothing to do with dahlias, but my son and his family and daughter and her family are visiting Australia at the moment. Now, started in Sydney, and then I don't know where else they're going.
There's only one good city in Australia, and that's Melbourne.
Well, I'll make sure that they get there.
When I started in Melbourne, I was on a 40-story building. I'm sorry, 44-story building. I was on the 40th floor. Today, that's one of the smallest buildings around. They're going 180 to 200 stories high now. But matter of fact, you have to have pressurized elevators to go up.
Oh, I'll be darned.
It's not that I'm biased or anything. Remember, just very quickly, Australia is the same size as the continental US. Caused the Revolutionary War, which of course we caused. Georgia used to be the prison state for English prisoners. But after the Revolutionary War, they couldn't send them to Georgia anymore. So they sent them to Sydney and Australia. And so Sydney, Australia was built as a convict city. Melbourne, however, was a little later on. And after the California gold rush, there was what's been called the Victorian gold rush. Victoria is the state of Victoria. And Victoria took supplies to and gold from the gold fields. So Melbourne was built on gold. And so all the streets are easy to get around, everything's straight and planned. Or Sydney was just built by the convicts, wherever they could put a pick, they put it. Not that I'm biased or anything.
Right. So anyone have any Dahlia questions or need help with anything as we kind of near the end?
Jez, I would love to see, we've been talking about the shows and how to stage. I'd love to see some pictures of the blooms staged. So I can see if I can bring some in.
Okay, I don't know that.
I'm on the website.
There's-
Sharon,
Is it on the website?
Sharon, don't we have some pictures of the shows?
I don't know that we do, guys.
I've got from last year, the whole Dahlia show video, walked all the way down the table and around. I can send it to you by text. I've done that before. I think I sent that to, who did I send that to? Mike? Did you get that?
No, I did not, Bob.
Did not.
Well, my email address is king. My email address is king.dwight
So I'll
at gmail.com.
I'll email the two of you. Don't stress, Bob.
All right, thanks.
I'll email you Dwight's email. Dwight, I just dropped a link in the chat as well on Zoom to one of the galleries on the website.
If you send me that video, Bob, I can put it on the website. Is it small enough to email?
I don't know. Sometimes I have problems sending it email, but I've sent it text. It takes about 3-4 minutes for it to process through my phone, and then it sends it, but I've been pretty successful with that. So I could probably send it easier on a text than I can through Gmail.
I can take text too, just fine.
I'll try either way,
Okay, you two now have each other's emails. I just emailed you both. So
I can do it.
Great. Thank you, Jess.
Yeah.
I was going to mention about the fair, Chicago Fair. If you have not been there and all that, so it's not too, oh, where do I go and all that. If you've never been down there, enter and you come down Eastland off of Bagley, you enter in that first parking lot there. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody there gonna have you buy a ticket or anything at that early or before that. So you can walk all the way down to building 16. And then after you get in there and you stage, before you leave the day, you go down to the fair office and if you haven't registered, and then you register there, usually $12, but that gets you a ticket for coming in if you want to come back on Sunday also. So just so I'll let you know, and so you're not worried about oh, what do I do, where do I go? So
great. Anything else anybody has? No. All right, just a reminder, this is our last meeting until October. So we're hitting show season. So make sure to read your emails for all the events coming up. And if you have questions, just shoot me an email.
And Dwight, if you go to the website, we have the national show gallery out there too. Just look under photos or galleries
Okay, thank you.
on the DSO website.
All right, guys, I think that's it. I'll see everybody 2 weeks for the picnic.
Gotcha.
All right, guys.
I'll try to make it, Jess.
Bye.
Yes.
Good night,
Good job,
everyone.
Jess.
Thank you
Good
so
job.
much.
Thank you,
Don't
Bye-bye.
Jess.